Thank you all for your patience. We're just now returning from closed session, and I'd like to ask the city attorney to bring us back and report out.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At approximately 5 p.m., the City Council called a closed session meeting. They recessed into closed session shortly thereafter. At approximately 6:10, the City Council recessed out of closed session. Here we are at the closed session report. While in closed session, City Council discussed two items. The first item, closed session, conference with real property negotiator, Government Code Section 54968.8, real properties, 11 C Street, Encinitas, California, APN, number 258-054-1600. City negotiators are Josh Gordon, Fire Chief, and Jay Schwarm, Administrative Services Director, to negotiate with Tom Cozens, the property owner, potential lease of price and terms. Mr. Cozens was not in closed session. While in closed session, the City Council gave direction to the two city real property negotiators to further negotiate. In addition, the City Council, the existing real property negotiation team subcommittee of Mayor Kranz and Councilmember Ehlers, effective December 10th, the City Council appointed Joy Lyons to be the second on the real property subcommittee, along with Mayor Ehlers, or along with future Mayor Ehlers. The second session, closed session, public employee performance evaluation, authority of Government Code Section 54987, title City Manager. And while in closed session, the City Council took no reportable action on this item. And that concludes the closed session report.
Okay, seeing no request to speak, that meeting is adjourned. And we'll give the clerk a minute to set up the next meeting on the magic machine. Okay, are we ready? Yep.
All set.
Okay. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Encinitas City Council for Tuesday, November 19th, 2024 at 6 p.m. And I'd like to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Lyons?
Here.
Councilmember Ehlers?
Here.
Councilmember Hensy is absent. Deputy Mayor Blackwell?
Here.
Mayor Kranz?
Here.
Record will show that all members are present with the exception of Councilmember Hensy.
Okay, very good. Thank you for being here tonight. I would have normally put this on a regular meeting as a council member initiated item, but the meeting tomorrow is likely to go very long. So I thought taking the opportunity here tonight was a better approach. And my goal with this item is to tee up the opportunity for the new council to have information presented to them that might be valuable in identifying stormwater projects to apply for Proposition 4 grants. So the report included a couple of projects that have been studied in the past. One actually had a CDP, which was the Jason Street drain to eliminate the lake that develops there. And the other is a underground detention storage facility at the roadside park. I think that is likely candidate because of the language in Proposition 4 that talks about stormwater harvesting. So, and then with regard to the project at Jason Street, maybe there's a way to include some stormwater harvesting in the final, in the solution that is developed for that. The other thing that I noticed as part of the watching the stormwater pipe be put in the ground on the North 101 was that I think one of the challenges with the drain that would facilitate the elimination of the lake at Jason Street was the idea that the 24-inch pipe was at capacity. And so trying to put more water in that pipe was problematic, and so therefore that project, even though it was relatively inexpensive, was put on the shelf. And so now that the pipe is going to, the 60-inch pipe that's part of Streetscape is going to be down at Jupiter, it really isn't that far away from where this Jason Street pipe was proposed. So I don't know if people have initial questions or comments, or whether we want to hear members of the public first, how you want to proceed. Okay, so let's hear from members of the public.
Okay, first speaker is Donna Westbrook, and then Gary Murphy with time donation from Betty Hanlon, who is present.
Donna Westbrook, Encinitas. I'm speaking tonight for Christy Dean, who is homesick. I'd like to know why we're pursuing a grant to address Jason Street storm drain improvements when it was not part of the third quarter Tom Ryan report adopted by the council in 2022. Instead, you're pursuing a solution from an older, obsolete report from 2018 that is no longer in the current adopted plan. This solution was never reviewed by council, but instead approved by Roy Sapal during a zoning administration hearing. No one from the council or public attended. Would you show the video, please?
That, but the cost to do something that would handle the bigger storms is just not a good use of money.
So this is not a good use of money to stop the flooding. Your quote that fixing Leucadia flooding was not a good use of money, Mayor Kranz, is consistent with your, with your 12 years of inaction on the issue while on council. What is your explanation for your sudden change of heart? Is it politically motivated? The special meeting and tomorrow's appears to be an attempt to salvage your reputation with the public. And I have to add, your reputation is gone. You don't have to worry about any things. And when they look at the history, they will see that you have not helped the people in any way while you sit there and become a I don't know, a little God, who knows whatever you think you are. You are not telling the people what is happening. And I understand that we have more draining problems than what we ever had before. We haven't been hit with the rain. We will be hit with the rain. And you, Tony Kranz, thank God you are the ex-mayor in a few more weeks. But we need people who lead and don't pontificate the way you have been doing. And I hope in the future we get our flooding fixed, which you have left and done nothing to fix. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who would like to see it done in Leucadia. And there are even more people who would like to see some of our streets fixed up better than what we have now, because I am certainly tired of running on all these potholes. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Mayor. Gary Murphy, 123 West Leucadia Boulevard. Okay, guys, I got a little bit of time into this drainage stuff, and I've talked a lot. And Tony, I know your heart's in the right spot tonight, I think. But these grants are important, that we get grants for good projects. I will never say that bringing water through the railroad tracks again is a good project, so I don't care where that pipe is at 60. We had a drainage ditch that ran from Leucadia Boulevard to La Costa Avenue and out into the lagoon that worked perfectly from 2006 all the way until 2012. All of a sudden, that drainage ditch has not been maintained. So I've walked it the last 2 days. And the culvert at Leucadia Boulevard cannot get the water through because it stops at East Jason. That water at East Jason's not just from coming down the hill. That water's coming from Leucadia Boulevard.
Yeah.
And it's dammed up. We need to open it back up. We got to go build a relationship with the railroad again. And I talked to railroad, the people that maintain the ballast, and they said that they've had communications with Public Works, and there was no money to help them clear it. It's supposed to be cleared because that trough clears Leucadia Boulevard, it clears East Galacus, it gets East Jason, and it does a big thing at the biodetention basin that's at Sanford. And then as you walk through, everything is clogged all the way down. Somebody in the city lost maintenance. But before we do any kind of grants or do anything, we're going to come in, we're going to clean that thing out, get all the pipes going into the flow of the basin, and see if we can get that water to run on the east side and not bring it to the west side. The Tom Ryan report, the 60-inch pipe all the way telescope to Basil Street, handles the 101 corridor. It does not handle anything on the east side. That's why he did a secondary $21 million project to do the other side. I think we need to go back before we do anything tonight. I know your heart was in the right place, and I'll give you the credit for that. But we don't do any grants until we make an agreement with the railroad again to do what they promised us in 2006 and leave that trough open so we wouldn't have standing water, we wouldn't have sinkholes, we wouldn't have ballast loosening up because of the standing water. If they don't want to do that, then they need to slow their trains down to about 45 miles an hour during rainy season. And if they can't do that, then they're just putting people that live along there into a situation where we could have a derailment. I'm really not happy because we had such a good system on that east side. It wasn't even one of my problems. And now, since 2010 or 12, we've had nothing but problems up there, and it had to do with the parking. You guys decided to put parking along that whole east side, and you scraped the dirt down to grade level, and you took out the ballast, which started blocking everything up. I know you guys did it accidentally, but it did it. We need to go back, build that back up again at East Galacus, that ballast, get the water running through, and then we put pipes under the roads at East Galacus, East Jason, and probably going to need to do them at Ashbury too, because we got some problems up there on Hygeia. Those are going to go forward. That's what we need the grants for. We don't need a grant for, I know the harvesting thing. I understand, Tony, what you're saying. That's my front yard. I'd love to have a detention basin there 10 years ago, but I don't need one now. And I don't want to hook nothing to that 24-inch pipe. I designed that pipe in 1995, and it was supposed to be 36 inches in diameter. Your engineering department, not you as a person, but the city's engineering department, dropped it to 24 inches, telling me that the outflow was 24 at Ponto. So I believed them, and I find out this year it's 18. They lied to me then, and they keep on lying. It's time for us to put it together to where the engineering department talks to the residents, and we all get together and we go forward. So let's don't make any decisions tonight on getting any grants, because this grant thing just came up, did you say on the 5th? We got time. Let's put some really cool projects together so we can take care of Hermes, we can take care of Hygeia, we can take care of everybody and see if our grants will go in big enough to where we can get the water into that basin along the railroad tracks that the railroad promised we can fix. And that's a job that the next council is going to have to do, is patch up that little disagreement we've got with the railroad so we know who's managing what and what it's going to cost us. And then we put it back together. We do a great project. We start working forward. And as we go along, we go to the $21 million project. We're ready to hook it up. All we got to do is put in the main line. And if the railroad does some work and the North County Transit decides to put the rail trail on that side, maybe they'll help us with some of the drainage. Let's see what we can get out of it. But let's just don't jump out and grab money until we know where the money is really going to be useful. And I think the east side of the track stays on the east side and the west side of the track stays on the west side. And I got 30 years as of February of this year of knowing drainage. And that's more than any of the engineers that were ever here. So the thing is, I can tell Greg Shills and all of them, they lied, they put us through this thing, and we lost millions of dollars off non-honesty. It's time for us to all be honest with each other and let's work together. And Tony, I appreciate you bringing us here tonight and showing this off, because what you're talking about is a very, very important area, which is East Jason and East Scalacus. And I want to take care of Hermes, and I want to take care of Hygeia, and I want to go up to Hymetis, and I want to get the couple in the cul-de-sac taken care of. Everybody was at that last meeting with Tom Ryan. I want to get it done. And Tony, I hope you can stand behind me and advise these guys, hey, let's don't make a decision tonight. I think we're right. We've got a little bit of time. Thank you very much.
That concludes speakers.
Yeah, so the point is not to apply for any grants or identify any projects, but there are, in fact, some benefits to initiating the process of establishing how will the future council decide which projects, and getting either Q3 on board or some consulting firm that can do maybe design build on some of these projects was what I was thinking would be beneficial to the future council. Not identifying any projects. I pulled up a couple of projects that long ago were studied and kind of give you a jump start. There isn't going to be a pipe in Vulcan anytime soon, unless maybe there's a grant that's available for that. And so the idea of draining the Jason Street Lake, to me, through bringing the water across the railroad tracks, I think is worth exploring. But, ultimately, that's going to be for the future council to decide. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Kranz. I'm going to call on staff for a little bit of detail, but I did want to respond to the speakers to say that I think that we do have a lot of drainage problems that have to do with stormwater around our whole city. And Mayor Kranz has identified a few, but we'll probably remember that we had Lake Drive as an issue this last year, to just name one that came forward that got a lot of attention and was unexpected and was an emergency response situation. So I think that this is well stated in the way that Mayor Kranz has put it forward, which is, and I'm not ready to make this motion, but it's really a broader approach than specific to the issues, Gary, that you were mentioning. So, and I think that's good. Let's step back, look at what the stormwater issues are across the city, and figure out what the strategy is for pursuing Proposition 4 grants. But in order to kind of clarify that a little bit more, it's kind of complex because these Proposition 4 grants are unknown at this point. And I had a conversation with our engineering director, Jill, on this, and she understands the process pretty well. And so I was wondering if you could summarize for us here tonight what the possible timeframes are. We do have some time. We don't know what the eligibility criteria are yet. Would you mind doing that?
Sure. So Proposition 4 identified several different buckets of money that would be administered by a few different state of California departments. And what those departments will do is they'll look at the amount of funding that's been allocated under this Proposition 4, and they'll come up with a notice of funding opportunity, a NOFO. And that NOFO will tell us what are eligible projects, what are the grant selection criteria, and what your grant application needs to look like. And those are kind of the most important factors that we look at when we're trying to determine which projects would be the best fit for a certain grant program, is understanding what the grant selection criteria are.
And I think that's true for a lot of grants. This one being a state grant that was just passed by the election, by this recent election 2 weeks ago. The state usually takes a while to get its act together to figure out what the eligibility criteria are, what might be favorable, what the selection criteria are. But that gives us a good amount of time to, first of all, tee it up and say, all right, there's this money that we've approved, bond funded. Where should we position ourselves, and what legwork do we need to do to make sure we've got our ducks in a row so that we're right on top of figuring out the best way to access some of that money? I just want to conclude by saying I am supportive of this, and I've been supportive of us trying to put our best foot forward, direct where our needs are to the right funding sources, and figure out how we can get either regional, state, or federal money to help us. We do have a history of being successful at that. And so I think this is just one more opportunity that's presented itself. And if we can get ahead of it, it would be a good thing. Thank you.
Councilmember Ayers.
Yeah, questions for staff. And typically in these kind of situations, when you get the NOFO, what kind of things do you have to have in place? Do you have to have the design done and shovel ready?
Yeah, it depends on the grant opportunity. Some opportunities will have selection criteria surrounding whether a project is shovel-ready, and if it's already been through design and environmental, often that's one of the criteria that, the selection criteria for grants.
Okay. And then as far as where we're going with Leucadia flooding, I think the most recent blueprint, I like to call it, is the Q3 report. Is that still our plan, that's the blueprint, not detailed drawings, but at least the concept?
Sure. So the most recent plans we have are the big drainage pipe that is 60 inches, and it gets smaller as it goes further south, but from Basel to La Costa on the 101 side. And then the more recent Leucadia watershed study we brought forward, that was the Vulcan drainage. That's, I think, closer to $30 million for the Vulcan side.
But that's all part of the Q3 report, correct? The Vulcan, and both North and South Vulcan and the 101, it was all coupled in there, and it was really, it was planned in conjunction with streetscape, certainly the 101 portion. Granted, the Vulcan was outside that. And then is there a pipe in the current Q3 report or in the Leucadia area watershed drainage feasibility study that includes a pipe going underneath the railroad tracks at Jason, in or near Jason?
That's not in the current study, no. They were, the Q3 report separated those two drainages.
Yeah, and so where did the study that we're looking at that was embedded in this report tonight was a staff report done, or actually a notice of decision that was done back in 2018. So it predated, and reading through it, it looked like it was based on that Doken report. Yeah, so, and so we then hired Tom Ryan, Q3, and Tom Ryan, and they updated it, and now it's separated. And I actually would take Gary Murphy's comments to heart, and certainly that's an area I want to focus on going forward, is get that trough on the east side of the railroad tracks north of Leucadia Boulevard flowing better like it used to, because we didn't historically have this problem. There may have been some parking grading that was done or something, we don't know, or maybe it was just migrating earth or something, but I think we can probably correct that and get that flowing again and solve this problem. And there may be even cheaper ways to get the drainage from on Vulcan over to this trough and down far enough that it drains naturally through the trough and not load up the 24-inch on the opposite side. So I guess I don't understand. I don't think I support this Jason project, given that it's old and it was based on an old engineering design. But there's probably some others that are cheaper and more effective and may be eligible. So where was I going with this? The question I have is, do we need to have more design drawings done then? Are we going to have to allocate some amount of money for projects in order to qualify for the notice of funding opportunities when they come up? It sounds like that's where we're going to have to go next.
That's possible. Sometimes these funding opportunities will have two different categories, a construction and then a planning. So
Okay.
this might be a project that we'd seek planning funding for.
Okay. Let's see, any other questions? I'll yield.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell.
Yes, thank you. I would very much appreciate if we can do whatever we can to be ready when the NOFO comes out, and whether it is a trough on Jason or drainage, as long as it's really not compacting or constricting the ability to walk on that side, which has really been helpful for a lot of residents to be able to walk on Vulcan. There is not sidewalk all the way through. If the trough helps accomplish both, that's great. I think, though, studying both would make sense, and I think the cost of the Jason Street ranked really high on the infrastructure priorities, and I think, as we talked in briefing, it might be around $1 million. There are other projects on there, of course. The Vulcan Avenue by itself is $30 million. It also ranked pretty high, as did the Lake Drive, which looked at a year ago was $7 million. So, if some of that needs to be chopped up into phases to get some of the grant funding, whatever you can do. But I think the drainage problems are real. We know that, and it would be very, very good to start addressing it and get some funding to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, and the why Jason Street? It's because that lake, it's pretty big and impacts traffic, impacts the neighborhoods. And has been there a long time. I think if you stood at Jason Street and you looked up to Sanford, you see it goes uphill. So I'm not 100% convinced that we can modify that trench to make that water flow. So what's ended up happening is that the water that is like, the Jason Street Lake seeps through the ballast and ends up on the 101 side of the tracks anyways, and makes mud and a mess of Highway 101. So, given the likelihood it's going to be a while before there's a pipe in Vulcan at that area, it seems to me a simple solution, which is what this Jason Street drain was, would be in order. I don't know if you've got the image of the My Encinitas storm drain at Leucadia Boulevard. You can show that image. That's the drawings from before. That's a PDF. That's not got it. There was an individual image that I sent in an email.
I've got photos and I've got a PDF.
It's not a PDF. It's a photo of, there's that. There may be a couple more photos there. That one right there. Is there a way that you could make that full size? Is it bigger? So Gary's right. So here's what happens with that stormwater on Leucadia Boulevard. Go ahead and pull it the other direction so that we can see.
Do you want to look north or?
No, I want to see more north. There you go. So the water comes across Vulcan, hits that little drainage ditch, and just kind of meanders on down. And, the question is whether Leucadia Boulevard water should be flooding the railroad right away or not. I know that, NCTD has their own MS4 permit. They recognize that it's our only solution at this time, but maybe there's a better solution. And maybe one of the solutions would be to look at the design and engineering of the existing pipe that goes down to Basil Street, and whether the segment between Leucadia Boulevard north to Jupiter could be turned into a detention facility, somewhat like storm trap, so that the water coming down Leucadia Boulevard could be captured in that. And again, that makes us more competitive for grants. While I recognize that there will be a NOFO, and then everybody's going to be pounding that agency, whatever the agency is, with their applications for grants, the reality is that the legislation is very detailed about who's going to get, how they're going to divide it up, what the percentages for each, issue is. There is talk about stormwater harvesting. So that's going to make the city more competitive with these grant opportunities. There will be other things like we're not a disadvantaged community, so there is mention of a bigger match. The bigger the match, the better. So there's a lot of things that I think bringing somebody on board, designing, engineering some more facilities. Obviously, we've got one that's shovel-ready that could go to Basel if there was a grant for that. But my goal was to tee it up for the next group of people that are going to be making decisions, very important decisions. And so that's why it was Jason Street. I love seeing the video. Thanks for sharing that video. That reporter asked me a question prior to that clip that wasn't part of the piece that made it on the TV. So I don't need to make excuses for what I said there. We were talking about something different than that, which had something to do with why can't you solve the 100-year storm with a pipe in 101? And it was because of the Q3 report and needing to have these different segments. But meanwhile, yeah, my reputation's fine. I'm going to do great. Looking forward to advocating for the city of Encinitas to make improvements to storm drains. I'll do that as a citizen just like I did before. Looking forward to it. So, Councilmember Ehlers.
So the in the Jason Street plans there's a sluice gate, correct? What's the guideline? I didn't see anything in the report about when do you open it, when do you close it? Would it be the same as the RCP sluice gate essentially?
I think that's a policy decision, but my understanding in previous conversations was that you would wait for the 24-inch or 60-inch or wherever you connect it to clear before you open up that sluice gate and drain that pond on the east side of the tracks.
So the ramification, if you didn't do that, would be that it would go into what is already a, what is it called, surcharged, overcapacity or filled to capacity pipe, would back it up, or if it was just barely under surcharge conditions, it would fill it up to surcharge, and then things happen upstream from it on the west side, right? So ultimately, we have a series of tide flux valves up going to Leucadia Park, to Basel, to the alley, and so as the surcharge, the capacity max hits, those things start shutting down and they stop draining the flooded areas upstream. So I would think, just like in the Q3 report, Q3 report in talking about the RCP sluice gate says, for example, quote, for example, the proper procedures for typical storm response involves keeping the sluice gate at RCP Block and Brick closed during storm events, flooding the Vulcan Union Street area until the storm has subsided to not add to the flooding at the Leucadia Park area. So it's in the Q3 report. I think we have the same situation down here. So I'm very hesitant to deviate from the Q3 report and put a pipe under that would put yet another load on the same outlet on that north side when hopefully we can get the trough on the east side of the railroad tracks working better, again, more appropriately, and avoid that. So, because I think we would be starting the exact same problem. You say it's a policy issue, but it's really a hydrology issue first. The policy should follow the proper hydrology. So I'm just careful. I think the Jason Street plan that's in front of us tonight as a I think a straw man is obsolete at this point, and I wouldn't support putting it in for a grant unless you can tell me that I can take that money and use it for a different Jason Street fix, in which case maybe that's a possibility when we get to the NOFO.
Again, the Jason Street was just an example of one that we had considered before. Could you put that PDF up that shows the picture of the two arrows? And go to that first picture. So this is where the lower arrow points to where the water would begin, which is at the red schoolhouse there, and the arrow points to where the water would end up in the 24-inch pipe. I can see why they decided not to put that in, because you can imagine the geyser that would be possible out of that drain if that had been put in and things got supercharged. Up the upper arrow is where the new 60-inch pipe is ending. So to me, it would make sense to find a way to get that Jason Street drain on the east side of the corridor connected to the new 60-inch pipe, which maybe there'll be a grant from this Prop 4 that would allow that 60-inch pipe to get to, be 36 inches down at Basil Street and one long pipe. But as it sits now, and by the way, that's a pipe that's in the ground because of me. I want to make sure that's clear. And, I'm not prone to taking credit and saying me, but frankly, this all started in 2019, and we advanced it, and we got a nice fat pipe going in, and it's going to go a long ways towards addressing some stormwater issues. So, but bottom line is, can you connect a Jason Street drain to that 60-inch pipe in the interim so that the lake goes away? And that's all I was thinking. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Kranz. I think that the Jason Street report has kind of taken our attention, and I want to pull us back. It's probably just the straw man. It was just put in there. Maybe is not quite what we're talking about here. So I think that's been explained. Obviously, there's a lot of thinking and a lot of strategy we have to do in order to understand what our larger stormwater challenges and issues are and where the opportunities are associated with this Proposition 4. So the way that I see it, and I've already mentioned, I think there are some other stormwater challenges in our community, and Lake Drive is one of them. This Proposition 4 also gives us the opportunities to put projects forward associated with our parks and our park development, and I know we need lots of money there, and there's lots of interest. It's also meant to fund habitat restoration, and we have a habitat stewardship plan and program which has been underfunded for a while, and we could benefit from putting that forward. So I think the bigger picture is there's lots of opportunities here in Encinitas to look at and strategize. Also, we need to bring into that conversation, are there some maintenance challenges? I mean, do we have some good infrastructure that really the challenge is maintenance? And another opportunity that I've spoken with engineering about is, do we have some regional partners where there's multiple benefits that would make a grant application much stronger? So I think that's all big strategy at the high level, the kind of the bigger umbrella. And I think that's really what the recommended action is here. So if people are in agreement with me based on what I've just said, I would like to move a recommended action to recommend staff be directed to, I'll put it differently, to direct staff to prepare an agenda item for some time, and I don't know if December is the right time. I'll go with that because that's how it's written, but I don't know if it might take longer than that. That would identify a strategy for pursuing Proposition 4 grants, and I think that's probably the high level that we're looking at.
I would second that.
So are you okay with changing it to prepare an agenda item for a future meeting? That would identify? Or did you want to keep December?
I'm going to defer to the author of this, Councilmember Shady.
I actually would defer to the mayor-elect, and if he wants it open-ended, and he's going to manage the agenda, and so.
Yeah, I
Open-ended?
think why don't we do it, because January is probably more likely.
Yeah.
Just
Want
given
January
the
or future meeting?
future meeting is fine. 'Cause if we can do it in December, great. If not, it's going to be a combination of staff and agenda.
Thank you for asking.
Motion carries unanimously with Councilmember Hensy absent.
This meeting is adjourned.
screen paint.